Welcome back to the 82nd online episode of Peacetime, hosted every Sunday morning by Peace Point with myself, Prime Nicholas Thanissaro, coming to you today from DIMC in Azusa, California. Last session we started on the second episode of the Illuminated text mini-series by looking at the first part of the Sigālovāda Sutta. It was a conversation between the Buddha and a young man who had been a rather stubborn guy who wouldn't listen to his parents. But when his parents were on their deathbed, they asked him to promise them just one thing before they died, to bow in the 6 directions every morning. So he agreed to this, and from that day forth, every morning he performed a superstitious ritual of bowing to the 6 quarters, north, south, east, west, above and below. His parents weren't stupid, but they predicted that if Sigla continued with this ritual for long enough, eventually someone would come along and ask him what he was doing, and whoever it was would be able to teach him the real reason for doing the ritual. So with the Dhamma talk today, we'll look at the second part of the Sigālovāda Sutta, and I estimate today's session will run to about an hour and 10 minutes, with a 20-minute break halfway through for some meditation and finishing up with questions sent in by viewers in advance. So last session we already looked at the first part of this teaching, and to recap quickly, you can summarize what we learned in terms of a triangle which has 4 points marked on it. We start at the yellow circle in the center, which represents responsibility towards our own sense of human dignity, especially by refraining from killing, stealing, sexual misconducts, or telling lies, demonstrating that we value ourselves as a human being. Having entered the ranks of an upstanding member of society, only then can we consider grading ourselves towards middle management. That would involve making decisions about other people's well-being, in which case we've moved down into the lower left-hand corner, the sock marked in red, which represents respect for the human dignity of other people, by making sure our decisions are not swayed by the interference of our emotions, whether it be greed, hatred, delusion, or fear. If we can master objective decision-making, we have the possibility to upgrade ourselves further into the brown corner marked econ, which represents our ability to foster an economy of human dignity for the whole of society. And this dealt specifically with avoidance of what are known as the 6 roads to ruin, things like gambling, alcohol, and intoxicants, which not only drain away our hard-earned wealth, but also usher in the sort of society which demeans the economy. So that in brief was what we looked at last session. But before we pick up again with the remaining apex of our triangle, there is one piece of the sutta which we skipped over last session due to lack of time, and that is a paragraph in the manuscript on wealth management. As a logical extension of not squandering our wealth on the 6 roads to ruin, we see, first of all, in this paragraph that the Buddha advocates the careful management or budgeting of our wealth. So the rough guidance he gives is that only 1/4 of our income should be used for day-to-day expenses, while 1/2 is reinvested in our business, and 1/4 is set aside for emergencies or to pay out on insurance premiums. So we turn now to examine the main message of the session today, what is known for short as the 6 directions, which is represented by the final remaining corner of the human dignity triangle, the green apex marked Env. It deals with the environment, but with special focus on our human environment, since it is the human beings around us who have the biggest effect on our habit formation. One thing which you'll hear again and again in our temple is the importance of habits rather than knowledge, because a person can know all the theory about good or bad, but still fail to put it into practice by making it a habitual part of their personality. So essential to the task of changing habits is frequent repetition. We have to put in regular and frequent effort to change those habits for the better. And this is why the people around us, especially the people who are close to us, are a very important factor in the development of our habits, because it's the people we see every day who influence us the most. In Western society, it's often assumed that we are self-sufficient, that if we want to improve, we can do it all on our own, that we don't have to look to other people to help us change. Or for those who accept that they're not self-sufficient, then the onus is put on the government policy to pressure people to change. Consequently, we often overlook the importance of people around us in influencing our values, our behaviors, and what we take to be normal in life. So we come to this sutta, having talked about friends who are sympathetic and so forth. The Buddha actually applies friendship to the 6 main groups in our life who have the biggest effect on our habits. And this is where the Buddha reveals that bowing in the 6 directions can be upgraded from symbolism by having respect for or upholding one's duties towards 6 different social groups whose habits brush off on us. And I admit that looking at the prose listing of paragraph 29 may not be as clear as looking at it in tabulated or graphic form. My own teacher in Thailand, the Venerable Tatachiwo, has arranged the 6 directions into a sort of cube of respect for human dignity, where you, yes, each of you, have social interfaces in 3 dimensions. So, there you are in the cube in the center of the graphic. Around you are arranged the 6 social groups, which are closest to you in terms of your habit formation. Looking at each in turn, in front of us is the group which includes our parents, mother and father. Behind us, if we're married, would be our spouse and children. On our right hand, we have our academic teachers, so the teachers in our school. At our left is our friends and buddies. In fact, not just our buddies, but everyone who isn't mentioned specifically in the other social groups, who have an influence over our values and ways of thinking. Beneath us, we have our colleagues, employees, employers, or servants who work for us or those who we work for. Above us, we have our spiritual mentors, a group in which we might include monks, priests, or clergy of our chosen religion. The idea is that as we grow up, our repertoire of habits is going to be influenced by the quality of our relationships with these 6 groups. If you are the sort of person who gets along well with all 6 of these groups and manages to learn something from their good habits, which those groups bring to us, then we'll become a person whose habits improve throughout our life. Makes sense so far? So the process by which you acquired your personal habits in the period from the cradle to the time you started school would have been by unintentionally mimicking your parents' habits and attitudes, together with the behaviors they rewarded or punished. Once you start school, you'll start to pick up the habits of your teachers, together with behaviors they reward or punish. If you haven't managed to pick up any good habits from your parents or teachers, then perhaps you'll get some good habits drummed into you by your life partner. If they can't do anything for you, then perhaps it'll have to be your friends or peers who will provide you with a repertoire of good habits. In the workplace, you'll also be affected by the attitudes and habits of your colleagues, whether it's your boss, your co-workers, or your employees. For all these groups of people, since you spend so much of the day with them, the likelihood is that their habits will brush off on you to a certain extent. And if you're a religious person, then the sort of religious activities you join will have some effect on your value system and your habits. Another thing which I should clarify is that when we study the manuscript, you'll notice that each of these 6 habit-forming groups is discussed in terms of duties rather than rights. In civil society, most of the discourse concerns human rights. Protesters demand their rights in a fairly one-sided way, where demands are made for things like medical treatment or the right to vote or whatever, without doing anything to earn those privileges apart from perhaps paying your taxes and obeying the law. Just by being a law-abiding citizen of the country, you expect all these things to come to you for free. But the social scenario which is laid out in the Sigālovāda Sutta is one of give and take. So only if you perform duties of a certain sort towards these 6 groups should you expect them to reciprocate with certain duties back towards us. But the reciprocity of the sets of duties is not as important as the good habits that arise for an individual as a result of doing them. So if we look at paragraph 30 first, let's take, for example, our parents. The manuscript informs us that a son or daughter should consider, once I was supported by my parents, now I will be a support for them. So it's saying that the duty of a child to the parents is to look after them, especially in their old age. I will perform those duties that they have to perform, so maybe assist with their work as much as you are capable. I will maintain the lineage and tradition of my family, so hopefully the good ones. I will look after my inheritance, and once my parents pass away, I will give alms, performing religious rites on their behalf when they are dead. Are you familiar with the idea of merit in Buddhism? It's not the same sort of merit you get on a diploma when you do some public service for society. But if you remember a couple of sessions ago with the Julagama Vibhanga Sutta, the logic of karma tells us that if we do good deeds, then good deeds will return to us. But the way in which those actions come back to us is that when we do something good, there's a sort of energy which arises somewhere within you, which in the future will attract good things back into your life. To cut a long story short, that sort of energy is what we refer to as merit. When we do something good apart from it benefiting ourselves, we may also make a wish that other people benefit from this accumulated goodness. And a particular group of people who Buddhists like to single out for that attention is loved ones of ours who have passed away. The reason being that in Buddhism, being alive in the human realm is considered to be a very privileged position. It's a state of being where we have the free will, the independence, and the wherewithal to do a lot of good deeds in our lives. However, once we die, the possibilities for doing as many good deeds is much reduced. Even though we might get to be in heaven, let's say, but the opportunities to do good deeds are much reduced because we are just on the receiving end of all the merits we have previously done. So generally speaking, a dutiful Buddhist son or daughter would think of loved ones who have passed away, such as their parents, and try to do good things on their behalf by dedicating their own merits for the benefit of those loved ones, with the wish that, may my parents have a better quality of life wherever they have been reborn. So this is an example of the 5 duties which a son or daughter would practice towards their parents. In fact, there are 6 sets of reciprocal duties. And just now we looked at the first of these sets of duties which a child should perform towards their parents. But, as I mentioned before, it's not one-sided. The parents have to keep up their side of the bargain as well. So what are the duties which parents should practice towards their children? Well, the first thing is to prevent them from doing wicked things. So that means they should teach them a sense of discipline. Secondly, parents should encourage their children to recognize good and virtuous things to do in their lives. Thirdly, to make sure they're properly educated, to use modern-day parlance. Fourthly, to arrange for their marriage. So does that mean an arranged marriage? Well, in India in the olden days, it probably would have. Indian parents arranged to have their son or daughter married off to an eligible suitor. But in the present day, most people would probably balk at the idea of such parental interference. The contemporary way this advice is interpreted is that supposing your son or daughter wishes to get married, and you shouldn't be pushing them into it, then maybe you could offer a valuable second opinion for their choice of fiancé, given that as a parent, you have more life experience than they do, and perhaps you're not quite as blinkered by the emotional aspects as they may be. Lastly, you should pass on your inheritance to them. So you can see that there are 5 duties which a son or daughter ought to perform towards their parents, and 5 duties which the parents ought to perform towards their son or daughter. Sound fair? If both keep their side of the bargain, then those aspects of parenthood or childhood will ensure both parents and children will improve their habits. Of course, fulfilling the prescribed duties requires a little extra effort from everybody involved. Unfortunately, some parents think that schools ought to be the ones to teach their children what is right and wrong. Or they think, oh, we'll wait for our children to grow up a bit more, and then we'll teach them all about right and wrong. They're still too young now to understand about these things. Parents passing the buck may be a dire mistake, because the formative years when children calibrate their ideas about right and wrong can be very early indeed. It can start from the age of about 1.5 onwards, so virtually from the time when children start to speak and walk is when they are starting to form an opinion about where to draw that ethical line. So it is down to the parents to be quite firm in this respect. Parents may have to punish their children if they cross the line, and in fact failing to punish would be considered neglect of parental duties. More commonly, parents may worry, uh-oh, what goodness do I have to pass on to my children? How am I going to manage to be a role model? How do I get to be knowledgeable enough about spiritual teachings to be able to answer all their questions? So commitment to the 6 directions actually forces the parents to become more knowledgeable about spiritual and ethical matters than perhaps they would be otherwise. So the whole experience of parenthood actually pressures parents to become a better person. But although it is a two-way street, the parents should initiate and the children reciprocate. Even if the children are stubborn, it doesn't mean that mom and dad should give up trying to be good parents. So this is the nature of the reciprocal duties of the Eastern Quarter, which is the relationship between the child and the parent. The second of the 6 directions deals with the relationship between the pupil and teacher. And although I've mentioned that children should be raised to know the difference between right and wrong before they get to go to school, these days it's often left to the school to step in and solve disciplinary problems as well. So looking at paragraph 33, the first duty pupils are charged with is to stand up when the teacher comes into the classroom out of respect for the teacher. Secondly, the pupil should serve the teacher maybe in more ways than just bringing them an apple. Thirdly, by being obedient to what the teacher teaches, or at least being eager to learn. Fourthly, helping the teacher out even in things which might go beyond the classroom context. For example, if the teacher is moving house in Buddhist country, the children in the class would be expected to go and help them to move house, because they regard their teacher as their friend and not just as someone who's being paid to tutor them. Lastly, the pupil should be attentive and respectfully learn the arts and sciences. So if pupils were able to follow these 5 principles, I think the atmosphere in the classroom would be very different from what you find today, with the teacher basically at the sharp end of the children's rights issues. But the teacher too has to keep up their side of the bargain by firstly going out of their way to pass on as much of their knowledge to the children as they can. So making sure the students are well trained, teaching in a way the students can understand, making sure they are thoroughly instructed, praising them where praise is due, and looking after their students' welfare even in things which might go beyond the classroom. I once heard about teachers in Thailand who had very poor students who arrived in school barefoot. The pupils were so hungry when they came into class that they couldn't concentrate on what was being taught. The teacher at the time told me she spent about half of her income on providing breakfast for those children. If their stomachs were rumbling, no one could concentrate on anything the teachers were saying to them. In the end, many of those teachers have moved on to different occupations because they simply couldn't make any money out of their former career. They couldn't hardly support themselves, only because they were having to fulfill their duty in the Southern Quarter. Moving on to the third of the 6 directions, we come to the reciprocal duties between husbands and wives. I should mention that in the era of so-called concurrent relationships, the advice shown in paragraphs 36 and 37 may sound a little dated, especially when it is based on gender stereotypes. But if we can take the advice with a pinch of salt and focus on wisdom applicable to current norms, the sutta starts by telling us a husband should honor his wife. So at least by acknowledging that she is his wife. Secondly, he should not look down on her. He should be faithful to her. He should delegate authority to her and provide her with gifts on occasion. Sound fair enough? But for her part, she needs to make sure that the work delegated to her is kept well in hand. She must be hospitable also to the in-laws. She too must be faithful and must take good care of the family property. I'm conscious at the time when this was written, it was still traditional for wives to jump into the funeral pyre after their husband. So it's likely that what we are reading here was relatively progressive for 2,000 years ago. Nonetheless, we should bear in mind that social expectations of women in those days would be that if they were a mother, then they would stay at home. So women would reign supreme in the home and everything to do with it, whereas the husband would be the wage earner with duties taking him outside the home. Stereotypic roles are not the main point here, though. The same principles of habit formation can still be applied in the present day, even if the gender roles are reversed. Someone still has to take responsibility for the running of the household, to make sure it is a place where children can grow up safe and secure. So there's no reason why a couple can't agree on how to divide up the work. But I think the important thing here is the sense of respect and sense of unconditional giving within a couple. So far we've seen 3 sets of duties in the 6 directions, between parent and child, teacher and student, husband and wife. It's probably a good juncture to take a break halfway and settle ourselves for 20 minutes of meditation, which today is a recording of the track entitled Homecoming for the Mind. If at this point you would like to find a comfortable sitting position for yourself as you listen to my guidance. If you'd like to start by adjusting into a comfortable sitting position for yourself, whether you're sitting on a chair or on a meditation mat on the floor, just set aside a little bit of time to make sure your body is adjusted to be as comfortable as possible. So try to keep your back fairly straight. But adjust your posture so that you're in a position by which you feel you could sit for a long, long time without needing to move around too much. So whatever posture you choose, you can rest your right hand over your left hand, the index finger of the right hand touching gently against the thumb of the left hand, with your hands resting palm upwards on your lap. We join our hands together in this way because if the index finger slips away from the thumb, it will give us advance warning of napping on the job. And we breathe deeply to ourselves. We allow ourselves to feel the breath softly making its way through our nostrils, through our airways, to the space within our belly. Breathing deeply to ourselves, we may feel the air filling our lungs slowly, expanding our chest, leveling our shoulders. From there we exhale slowly and gently, and as we breathe out, we may feel that our entire body is becoming settled, relaxed, and content. And we may regard meditation as the opportunity for our mind to make its way back to its true home, to the place where it belongs, the source and effect of our own inner peace. So we close our eyes as gently as possible, in the same way we'd close our eyes to go to sleep. The way we close our eyes should be in such a way that we don't close our eyes too tightly, with no pressure on our eyelids, never squeezing our eyes shut. In effect, we allow our eyelids just to droop, and this is the very first step on the journey of homecoming for the mind. From there, we bring our attention back to become aware of the sensations within our body, simply by observing our sitting posture, taking a little bit of time to adjust it to perfection, just in case any part of us is feeling blocked, tense, or tight. We continue to adjust our body until our circulation is unimpeded from top to toe. And once we find ourselves in a relaxed sitting posture, we can relax further by releasing tension in every single muscle of our body. And to this end, we scan down through the whole of our body, starting at the top of our head. So we bring our attention back to relax it there, moving our attention down to relax our forehead, down to our eyes, nose, through both of our cheeks, all the way down to our chin, feeling the muscles of our entire face have become relaxed. We allow that tide of relaxation to move down through the back of our head and into our neck. We allow the relaxation to spread down through both shoulders, along both arms, to our hands, until we feel any tension dissipated from our fingertips. We continue on down by turning our attention to relax our chest. We allow the stream of relaxation to move down through our abdomen, through our legs, all the way down to the tips of our toes, until we feel satisfied that our entire body feels as relaxed as it can be, with every muscle loosened up completely and feeling at ease. We'll be able to tell when our body is truly comfortable because it'll feel spacious on the inside. It'll feel as if the boundaries of our body have gradually disappeared and everything seems to become alive, spacious, and refreshed. And in the same way our body needs to become relaxed for meditation, we also need to free the mind of any worries, frustration, irritation, or any of the problems that we might be keeping suppressed. By shedding all of them, unburdening our mind, and letting go of whatever negativity may still be lurking in our mind, we allow ourselves to become free of all of it completely, because the real origin of freedom in the mind is unburdening ourselves as far as possible from any residual negativity. It's almost like spring cleaning our mind one step at a time. And as the negativity disappears little by little, there will be increasingly a space within the mind for peace, purity, happiness, and wisdom to arise. So for the moment, we let ourselves become as free as possible from any potential disturbance, letting it go completely as a second step in the mind's homecoming on its journey toward inner peace. We might conjure up in the mind a feeling that we are filling up every single cell of our body with a feeling of joy, serenity, and happiness, until that feeling seems to pervade every last cell of our body. At the same time, we empty our mind of all thoughts, engaging instead with our feelings, our sensations, and our awareness. Then we gently gather together all our awareness, sensation, or consciousness in an area somewhere around the center of our abdomen, in keeping with our intention to engage with that sense of comfort. And if we ever lose touch with that sense of comfort, we can gently make an adjustment at any time to return ourselves to the best state of relaxation that we can manage. Again, regarding this as a homecoming for the mind. And you may imagine that you're sitting alone high on a mountain with an uninterrupted view to the horizon. Although you're sitting alone, but you don't feel lonely. Alone but content, on top of a mountain, free from any interference, completely carefree, perhaps with a gentle breeze blowing right through your body, to the extent that your body feels light in weight, soft, almost as if it's floating weightlessly, melting away into the atmosphere around you, until the sense of relaxation from the inside seems to be continuous, with the worry-free surroundings that extend all the way to the horizon. And you can allow yourself to be in the very middle of that space in which there's no disturbance, no intrusion, just our private haven of peace, where we can be entirely ourselves. And in essence, this is a space in which we can continue to free our mind of any residual negativity, feeling that we're becoming one with nature around us. And the more we can let go, the lighter and more spacious our own mind will become, until we can feel the center of that space within ourselves as the true home of the mind. So we bring the mind back home by gathering our attention and letting it gently rest in our center space within the body. The center space for the time being is any place inside us that feels tender and comfortable. We can place the attention there as gently as we can. Once our mind finds its way to where it needs to be, there will be an automatic arising of joyfulness and contentment in the mind. It doesn't require anything more. It is replete in and of itself. Our internal sensations will be ones of satisfaction. And all we need to do is maintain our awareness of that comfort. It's the sense of inner peace, which gradually emanates from within and continues to evolve as our own mind embraces our sense of consciousness with a light and gentle feeling that this is where the mind truly belongs. This is where true peace and purity can arise. And our job as a meditator is simply to maintain our mind, our awareness, at this point allowing our true nature to become full of peace and positivity. The feeling it gives us will be one of being unblemished and pristine, of clarity and purity. And all we need to do is maintain our awareness within this center space, letting it merge with that inner space. But if you feel that you need some sort of anchor for the mind, You might like to slowly visualize some sort of bright inner image, perhaps something as light as a bubble within yourself, a bubble that is crystal clear, floating free and weightlessly at the center of yourself. And you might imagine that a similar such bubble settles at the center of your body, delicate and fragile. All we need to do is maintain that picture of the bubble inside ourselves with the gentlest possible attention. We might imagine the bubble remains motionless or perhaps shimmering at the center of our abdomen, soft, delicate, gentle. We may discover that the bubble has its own illumination from the inside, or that it becomes gradually brighter, perhaps even as bright as the sun in the morning or at midday, but with a white light, a brightness that is cool and soothing, perhaps more similar to the light of the full moon at night. And it's a brightness that comes with a sense of peace, a feeling of ease, with a sense of illumination from the inside, from the center of ourselves. And all we need to do is maintain our awareness, the feeling and sensation at the center of that inner bubble, just slightly touching that feeling within the bubble of our awareness, while keeping our mind calm, still, relaxed, keeping the mind focused in stillness softly and gently. The mind should wander or get tangled up in thought. We don't need to try to stop ourselves from thinking. We just slowly guide our feeling, the focus of our attention back to the bubble again, always softly and gently, however many times it takes for the mind to start to stay centered, almost by second nature. And at this point in our meditation, all the thoughts and distractions will seem further away, as if in the distance. And all we have to do is simply observe the true nature of peace and tranquility, the sense of the depthening of the mind, that is awareness so still, so soft, so gentle. And at this point, all we need to do is observe. So we continue to keep our mind on track at the center of the body the whole of the time, always feeling the connection with our sense of inner peace for a few more moments in silence until we come to the appropriate time for some loving kindness meditation. Continue to keep our mind on track at the center of the body the whole of the time. Resting at a standstill. At the center of whatever inner experience we have built up for ourselves. For some people it will be like a bright, clear sphere of crystal at the center of the body. For others it may be like a pinpoint of light at the center of the body. For others still it may be like a feeling of warmth or well-being at the center of the body. Whatever sort of inner experience we have attained for ourselves, we place our attention very gently at the center of that experience. The very center of the inner experience within ourselves, touching gently. The same lightness of a feather, floating down to touch upon the surface of some water. So lightly that the feather doesn't even break the surface of the water. In the same way, we touch our attention at the center of an inner experience within ourselves. We touch our mind at the center with just the right amount of attention. What we'll find is that the inner experience of the mind will gradually expand outwards, expanding gradually outwards, until it is the same size as the whole of our body. So if we were sitting inside a sphere of our own well-being, or a sphere of our own light, and we make the wish to ourselves that may we be well and happy, may we be free of all suffering, and touching our mind again at the center of the body, the sphere of well-being or the sphere of light, that inner experience will extend outwards beyond our body, spreading outwards in all directions, just like the moonlight shines outwards from the full moon in the sky, or just as a block of ice sends forth the coolness in all directions around itself, into the atmosphere around it. In the same way, we spread our loving kindness outwards in all directions around ourselves, spreading the sphere of loving kindness outwards to encapsulate the whole room in which we're sitting for meditation, while making the wish that may all living beings here in this room be well and happy, be free from all suffering. We spread our loving kindness further outwards, still spreading outwards from the center of our body, to encapsulate the whole of the building in which we are sitting for meditation. Again, with a wish that may all living beings here in this building be well and happy, be free from all suffering. We spread our loving kindness further outwards beyond the building, outwards in all directions around us into the neighborhood around us, with a wish that may every living being here in the neighborhood be well and happy, free from all suffering, live together in peace and harmony. Spread our loving kindness further outwards still to the whole city, whole county, wider still to the whole country, extending loving kindness to all beings without exception, to the very borders of the country, in all directions all around. Again, with a wish that may every living being here in the country be well and happy, be free from all suffering. Extend loving kindness to neighboring countries, extending loving kindness in all directions to living beings without exception. Every continent of the world, spreading our loving kindness outwards, till our loving kindness extends across the whole of the face of this planet, with the wish that all living beings, without exception on this planet, be well and happy, free from suffering, live together in peace and harmony to allow world peace to become a reality within our own lifetimes. Emanate loving kindness outwards into the universe around us, in all the great directions, And having spread loving kindness in this way, we can condense our awareness back down to the center of our body again, taking careful note of the brightness, the clarity, the feeling of peace and joy at the center of ourselves, and in particular taking note of the feeling of well-being at the center of ourselves, remembering the feeling as well as we can, because this feeling of well-being is very important for us. It represents the state of progress in meditation that we have reached up until this point. If we can remember the feeling as well as we can, the next time we come to meditate again, we can pick up from where we left off with this feeling and continue to make an uninterrupted journey for the homecoming of the mind each time we meditate. But for now, we continue to meditate for the last few moments of our practice, noting the state of progress in meditation and remembering the feeling as well as we can for a few more moments in silence. Sapa Buddhanupavena, Sapa Dhammanupavena, Sapa Sanghanupavena Sattha Soti Bhavantu Te. So if you'd like to come to the end of your meditation for today, you can gradually open your eyes again. If you feel at all uncomfortable, then slowly try changing to a more comfortable position before gradually finishing your practice. So to pick up where we left off with our subject matter for today, we continue in paragraphs 39 and 40 with the fourth of the 6 sets of prescribed reciprocal duties relating to those closest to us in our lives, which in this northern quarter is between us and our friends. Last session, we already looked at the characteristics of good and bad friends, and because most of what we said then is simply reiterated here, today I'll only mention the prescribed duties in passing. So from us to our friends, 4 duties elsewhere known as the 4 bases of sympathy, which I'll come back to at the end of today's session, plus truthfulness. And in return, what we can expect from our friends is that they protect us and our property when we're careless, be our refuge in times of danger, not abandon us in times of trouble, and treat other members of our family with the same kindness they would treat us personally. So moving on quickly to the 5th of the 6 directions, we find that paragraphs 42 and 43 refer to labor relations. The workplace can be rather a cutthroat place these days, where you're simply hired to do a job, and even if you do your job properly, they still downsize and fire you by email, where the employer is constantly looking out for ways to pay less money to get more work out of the employees, and where the employees are always trying to get more wages for less hours. Really, a workplace conducive to right livelihood should have a rather different sort of atmosphere, where your boss treats employees like family members, looking out for each other's welfare, not only in the workplace, but also in their personal lives. In the time of the Buddha, many employees would live at their place of work, so their boss would need to provide for their living arrangements as well. So according to the duties of the down below direction, or Nadir, the employer is supposed to assign work to their employees according to their abilities. In this respect, there's a nice story I heard from Belgium about a Thai lady who worked in a medical research laboratory. Normally, her job was to clean racks of test tubes, and she had to lift quite a lot of heavy things. But at the time she became pregnant, the boss allowed her to change her role within the company to have lighter duties. So she continued to work right up to the time when she went into hospital. The flexibility of the boss allowed her to continue work within her capabilities seemed to me to be consistent with the sort of principles we're studying. Also, an employer needs to give due food, wages, and care for the employees in times of sickness, although these days it might be replaced by a proper medical package. And the employer is supposed to give employees special gifts on appropriate occasions, which might translate these days as bonuses, and to give employees holidays and leave at suitable times. Meanwhile, the employees should start work before their boss and finish work after them. They should not help themselves to things at work like paper clips and elastic bands, which their boss has not allowed them to have. And they should always try to find better ways to do their tasks, not just stay in the same job for 15 years and still be doing the task in the same inefficient way that you did when you started out. Also, employees are supposed to maintain and defend the good reputation of their boss, so not gossiping about them behind their back. As you can see, Buddhists paint a picture of quite an idyllic workspace, with relations more like a partnership than one of antagonism and exploitation. Last but not least, in the 6 directions in paragraph 45, we come to the upward direction, or Zenith, which represents reciprocal duties in the relationship between members of a congregation and their clergy. The congregation members should have kindly actions, words, and thoughts towards their spiritual teachers, keep an open house to them, and provide them with their material needs, which hopefully should not be too extravagant. You'll be familiar with the way there's the reciprocity between monks and lay people within Buddhism, since monks don't get a salary unless you count being given alms of 2 meals a day, sometimes 1 meal a day. So monks are quite low maintenance, but in return for their basic support, the monk must give something back to the people who provided the food, which you could think of as spiritual food. So what is given to the monks materially should be returned to those who gave it in a spiritual way. As monks have more time to research and meditate about spiritual teachings than lay people, who will be rushed off their feet by work and family, they should use that time to guide or clarify the spiritual understanding of those lay people. Monks should not take their alms and spend all day just lying around. They need to keep up their side of the bargain. So, obviously, if lay people are kind and supportive to their monks, the monks have a similar level of responsibility to the lay people to that of parents, that they should teach their congregation the difference between right and wrong. So supposing the parents didn't manage to instill the full complement of good habits in their children, the clergy or the spiritual teachers are supposed to take up the slack, especially by putting energy into teaching and training the laity and pointing them in the direction of heaven. If you look at the purpose behind all the prescribed duties in the 6 directions, you shouldn't lose sight of the goal of improving your habits through interaction with those closest to you. In this way, no matter how social values change, you'll be able to come to the right conclusion about how to apply the advice of the Sigālovāda Sutta in order to improve as a person, and how to adapt the historical advice to bring forth good habits on both sides of every relationship. Although society is made up of countless individuals, each person in the society can be considered to be like a little box connected to the other people in society through their 6 directions. So you have parents, your parents have teachers, your parents also have employees. One way or another, everyone is connected to everyone else in society through these 6 directions. So society can be broken down conceptually into little clusters of people connected together by their relationships. The message from the Sigālovāda Sutta is that although people's habits out there may cause problems in society, to get to the root of social problems, the most effective place to start solving them is with your own box. It may be complicated and ineffective to go and interfere in other people's private lives. But one place where you certainly can make some changes is in your own private life. For example, maybe look at how your relationship with your parents is doing. Ask yourself if there's something more you could be doing for your kids. Reflect on how long it's been since you visited your former teacher. If each person took care not just of their family, but of all their 6 directions, the sum of all that goodwill on a social scale would ensure that all the personal blocks would fit snugly together, because of the strong and positive relationship between all the different people in society. What tends to happen in society, however, is that no one takes care of any of their 6 directions. So instead of having a snug-fitting and cohesive society, you get people who have very superficial interfaces with those they are supposed to be closest to them. And therefore society falls into disarray. If you think about the sorts of problems which we do have in society, where no one has respect for anyone else anymore, not even their own parents sometimes, then it's very hard to foster social improvement. All you get is governments throwing money at social problems. Of course, the Buddhist vision for society doesn't assume that there's going to be a hierarchy. The Western version of this model would probably be more egalitarian, a scenario where no one's really much higher than the next person, especially in countries without monarchies or national religions. In such societies, the blocks would still fit snugly together, but with more of a low-rise structure than, say, Asian societies. By comparison, the Asian societies would have more of a lofty structure, where the respect given to people is more disproportionate. But irrespective of the social style, this sutta encourages people to have strong relationships with those who are closest to them in society. Why? Because those with the strongest relationships tend to find themselves at the center of society, because they act like the backbone of social structure. By contrast, the people who don't fit together so snugly, whose relationships with others tend to be a little bit more unreliable, tend to find themselves at the edges of society, because society is held together by the people who maintain a rapport with the people who are closest to them. In this respect, the 4 bases of sympathy, or Sigālovāda, usually credited to the Lakkhana and Samgiti suttas, as mentioned earlier, also appear incognito amongst the duties of good friends to one another in the Sigālovāda Sutta. The 4 bases of sympathy comprise generosity, endearing speech, helpfulness to others, and trustworthiness or reliability. These 4 qualities of human connection can be thought of as being like the mortar that binds the bricks of society together. These are the basic principles behind the duties practiced in all the 6 directions, and are the attitude with which we ought to practice our duties towards the people in our 6 directions, in order that we can maximize the good habits that we learn from them. Just as an aside, if you are a fan of Stephen Covey's 1989 bestseller, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, you'll find that the 4 bases of sympathy are also in there, but they've been rebranded as what he refers to as the emotional bank account. So the Sigālovāda Sutta is, in essence, a teaching about human relationships. Although superficially, the Sigālovāda Sutta's 6 directions may look like quite a quaintly worded teaching, but if you think about it conceptually, it does offer a model society, also telling us where to start changing things if we're not contented with how society treats us. If you can improve the relationship with the people who are closest to you, you find yourself rising to a more influential position in society, putting yourself in more of a position to change other people's lives through the fact that you're connected to them through friendship rather than through fear or through power imbalance. This is why duties implied in the 6 directions are, to this day, deeply embedded in the culture of majority Buddhist countries. Some other thoughts which the sutta leaves us with are that for each of the pairs, you should notice that usually the duties are initiated by one side and expect to be reciprocated by the other. But if kindness is not reciprocated, apart from indicating the damage caused, the Buddha left it to personal discretion to decide at what point it would be better to give up on salvaging a relationship. In this respect, things like domestic violence will probably give you an idea of the territory we're dealing with. The sutta also shows us that we cannot expect to succeed in the workplace if we do it at the expense of our relationships at home. So it's like a very early precedent for the idea of what we would call work-life balance in the present day. So we return to the story of this young man who has been blindly performing a superstitious ritual for so many years, and we see the intervention by the Buddha sought to remedy the stubbornness of a teenager who had failed to get on with his parents, despite his wealthy background. The Six Directions teaching put Sigālovāda in a position whereby he was able to examine his own relationship with society so that he could reintegrate himself rather than remaining an outcast. As we can see in paragraph 48, the outcome of this particular teaching was that Sigālovāda was so impressed by what the Buddha taught that he asked to become a Buddhist follower from that time forward. So that concludes our 2-session study of the Sigālovāda Sutta. But to finish off with today, we have a question sent in by one of our viewers, Cleopatra of Phoenix, Arizona, and here comes the question. Before, I was a regular meditator, but since becoming a mother, I find I am run off my feet 24/7, and my meditation practice has become a little choppy lately, to say the least. I'd like to ask if you can give me any advice for ways to rescue my meditation while continuing to fulfill all my duties as a new mum. Hi Cleopatra, I remember your previous question about introducing meditation to young kids. Your question today about meditation for new moms seems to continue on a similar theme. Again, I'm not sure that monks are the ideal fountain of knowledge on the subject, but fortunately, a lot of new moms seem to be bloggers. So, from the plethora of advice out there, I think there are 6 recommendations that seem to resonate. In the ideal world, the joy of welcoming a new baby into the family would transcend any stress that falls on a new mom. But just to cope, the new mom is up against hormones, sleep deprivation, and possible depression, not to speak of a whole new daily schedule centered on the baby rather than themselves. The whole experience can feel overwhelming even for moms who meditated previously. So for busy new moms like yourself, it may be that you need a whole new game plan, at least for the first 2 years until your newborn becomes a toddler. First suggestion I can make is that the baby's sleep time might be the most reliable time for you to sneak in some meditation. Even though your new baby may seem to spend most of the day or night babbling or crying, there will be some unpredictable times when they do actually stay asleep. Although it may be tempting to keep watch over the cradle or go to bed yourself, it can equally be the opportunity to squeeze in some time for meditation, even though, by the principles of Swiss cheese time management, the length of time you might get for your meditation might be a little bit random. The second suggestion for meditation time is to meditate while feeding, since for this short period each day you do actually get to sit down. Instead of using the time to worry about party themes or doctor's appointments, this can be a time again when you can focus inwardly to meditate. So, while building a connection with your child, feeding can be an opportunity at the very least to calm down, breathe fully, and return to the present moment. Third piece of advice is not be afraid to accept help from other members of your extended family. You're probably familiar with the expression, it takes a village to raise a child. So instead of trying to take everything on yourself and wondering where all your meditation time went, the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center advises that extended family can greatly improve the emotional, mental, and physical well-being of new parents by showing up and compensating for situations where they may fall behind. For example, your baby's aunt can do laundry or help prep a meal. A grandparent might offer words of encouragement from their memory of similar transitions. Meanwhile, your siblings, parents, or in-laws can bring a deeper knowledge of your preferences and help step in exactly where others may feel inadequate. The bottom line is that the baby benefits too. Fourth piece of advice, especially when care for a newborn is pushing you to your limits, is that engaging with feelings of gratitude can greatly help with resilience. Of course, there is so much about having your own new child that automatically triggers a sense of gratitude. But if we're caught up in constant demands, we can sometimes forget to check in with those feelings, which has led some bloggers to suggest sticking a post-it with the word gratitude on your bathroom mirror. Such gratitude can help overcome any negative self-talk and be a constant reminder that despite the naysayers, you are being a great mom. A fifth piece of advice, really borrowed from our temple's 10 items of homework, as an exercise to boost mindfulness, helps busy mothers to come back to their center despite all the external demands on their attention. You can set up a reminder, perhaps on your phone, to bring your mind back to the center of your body once every hour at the top of the hour to prevent yourself getting too frazzled. Lastly, to pull ourselves back from the brink of panic, people are often advised to breathe or count to 10. More commonly in our temple, though, if things are getting on top of us, if we can't find the time to close our eyes, we advise people to bring themselves back to the present by reciting the mantra Samma Arahang under their breath, or they can go the whole hog with more extended verses of chanting. In the Thai Buddhist tradition, the Sorapanya style of chanting is quite soothing and will double up as a lullaby, with plenty of examples to be found on YouTube these days. Alternatively, you can adapt chanting or a mantra from other traditions to serve the same purpose. So this session I have introduced to you the second part of the Sigālovāda Sutta. So for my next live session online, which will, fingers crossed, be a week on Sunday morning, we'll move on to look at the Samanyapala Sutta, which is the teaching about the fruits of true monkhood and gives helpful advice on discerning a true monk. For good measure, I'd like to remind viewers that you can email your questions about meditation or what you have heard in the lecture to the email address that you can see spelled out on the slide. And I'll do my best to answer these on my next session. In the meantime, try to avoid recklessness or complacency as we continue to deal with the knock-on health and economic effects of the pandemic. Maintain a positive mood, speak only positive words, forgive others, extend good wishes to others, and meditate daily. Hopefully, as a result of today's session, you will more effectively manage to absorb the best of habits from the good folks in your 6 directions. So for today, this is me, Phra Nicholas, Thanissaro, signing off for today. So long, folks, and stay safe.